Isn't a restrictor plate so it can't go over a specific mile per hour?
Yeah, NASCAR put in the restrictor plate after an accident at Talladega because Talladega and Daytona are the biggest tracks. Talladega is 2.6 miles. Daytona is 2.5.
I've been to Talladega. No big deal.
In 1987, Bobby Allison was going down the
Correct.
front straightaway at Talladega and blew a left rear tire, and it blew the sheet metal off the car, and he went sideways, and the car took off. That's when they were doing about 215 at Talladega, and his car tore down about 200 yards of fencing and almost went to the grandstands.
Dude, the video of that looks pretend. Like it looks like it's from a movie. It's like, oh my God, the car is flying into the crowd.
Yeah.
If it wasn't for like this fence.
Yeah. And NASCAR realized then, like, we need to keep these cars at 200. Otherwise, airplanes take off at about 140, 150 miles an hour. So you're thinking these cars are going there at 200 consistently during the race, the whole time. They don't let off in the corners of these tracks. So they put a plate on top of the carburetor that would make the holes in the four-barrel carburetors smaller, so less gas and less air would get into the engine, so they would run slower. Well, now they don't run the restrictor plate anymore. They run what's called a tapered spacer, which is essentially the same damn thing as a restrictor plate. But it gives them – the problem with the restrictor plate was it didn't give them, like, if you had to stay on the throttle, and these guys couldn't – if you let off the throttle, you're fucked. You're going to get hung out in the draft because you're in the draft. You have to stay in the draft to stay up. These cars by themselves would run 180, but in the draft they run 200. So you got to, the front car, Days of Thunder, John, you wouldn't know because you didn't see it. But
Nope.
But Kev,
I'm with you.
Yeah, the front car punches a hole through the air, and the car behind them can drive up to them because they're not hitting the air, and they can push the front car even faster. So that's why they're going 200 miles an hour. They usually get to about 205, 207 right now around these tracks, and that's where NASCAR wants to keep them down below 210. Between 200 and 210. And so now they run the tapered spacer, which does the exact same thing the restrictor plate does, which is restrict the airflow going into the engine. So the engine will run a little bit slower than it should. Otherwise, these guys would be going around there doing 250 miles an hour, and they'd have to back the grandstands up probably about 50 yards to protect the fans or build fences.
Don't you have this constant, dynamic where the drivers and the crews and the technology is continuing to improve and they can be faster and lighter?
Yeah.
But meanwhile, NASCAR wants to keep them down at a safe level, right? Is that a constant struggle?
Oh my, that's what makes the sport great, because the crews are trying to get stuff into the car to make it, if you get 1 or 2 mile an hour faster on the other guys, then, you have a huge advantage at a track like that. So NASCAR puts these cars through tech. They tech them before practice, qualifying, and then the race. And these crews are always trying. If you're not cheating, you're not trying. That's the motto in NASCAR. You got to try to cheat.
Sure.
And they always used to cheat. Like, it used to be really blatant back in the old days. Like, I don't know if you guys ever heard of the driver Darrell Waltrip. He commentates on Fox sometimes for the races.
Oh yeah, Waltrip.
Yeah, he was a successful driver in the late 70s and 80s. They actually would fill his car. They would use lighter tubing in his roll cage and fill the tubing with BBs. And Walter would pull a little lever after he went through inspection. They're sitting on, they fire the cars up on the grid, and he'd pull a little lever in the cockpit of the car and let all the BBs out. And NASCAR found out about it because they were listening to his radio one day. Right before the race, Waltrip goes, "Bombs away," and pulls the lever, and all the BBs come flying out. So they do everything. I mean,
bombs away.
There are drivers that used to sneak traction control into the cars so they could just mash the gas off the corner and not have to feather it as much. So then NASCAR put the ignition box up on the top of the dashboard so they could see it, so they know if the driver's if there's any messing with the traction control, because the drivers used to just wear it in their suits and then slap it on there when the race would start and then just go. You want the air to not go over the spoiler. The spoiler slows you down. It creates downforce, but it slows your ass down in the back.
Oh, right.
So what they do is they'll like collapse parts of the back windows, like have things that'll break. They make it so it'll break during the race. And, these guys are good. They know what they're doing. So there's still that shit going on. And they just had 2 crew chiefs get ejected from the track last weekend.
Bob, we need to bring you back on for another show. And we need to do an entire show about cheating in sports and how all the different sports, they all cheat. It would be such a great topic to analyze in all the major sports, and even into NASCAR and golf and tennis and everything else.
On this whole baseball cheating scandal.
Right.
Yeah. Where do you draw the line in baseball? Because baseball has a culture of cheating, with pine tar and all that stuff. But where, some of it's like, it's okay. It's kind of look beyond, but where does that line get drawn?
I love the cheating idea for an episode. Bob, like when we're talking about the modifications to the car and the guys trying to cheat and NASCAR trying to regulate and all that kind of stuff, is there any difference in the cars really? I mean, I know you've got your Ford, your Chevy, your Toyota, your Dodge, whatever. With all this regulation, is there much difference in the cars?
That's a great question. It used to be stock car racing. The teams would literally, back in the 50s, 60s, and, probably in the early 70s, they would buy a lot of these cars off the showroom floor from the manufacturer, from the OEMs, and just, hollow them out, put a roll cage in them, and go racing. So it was real stock cars. Well, these are not real stock cars anymore. So the noses, like on the Ford, Chevys, and Toyotas, are different. The rear ends are a little different. But for the most part, they are pretty much exactly the same aside from the front nose. They all still have to kind of maintain like the same parameters in terms of, ride height and, things like that, height off the ground, roof height, everything. And they're all basically the same.
When you were talking about how they build from the roll cage out and then how everything's so regulated, it just made me think that the Chevy emblem or the Ford emblem or whatever at this point has just become branding.
Yeah,
because they're all okay.
You just slap it on the front and that's it.
Yeah,
and they mark because I've been in the garage and they mark the bumpers, with the manufacturer emblem. So the fabricators will mark the bumpers and all that stuff. And most of these cars, they're not even made of steel anymore. It's composite materials.
Who's got the best sponsor display? I always love the M&M's one.
You mean like right now or just ever?
Let's go both. Ever and right now.
Yeah.
Right now, I like so much.
He's a real fan. I mean, look at the turmoil.
Oh, gosh. I
almost like in a struggle. It's like asking me who my favorite Avenger is. I can't answer that. It's impossible. They're like my children.
Gosh, I'm going to have to start with in the past. I loved the Cale Yarborough 28 Hardee's car.
These guys always have
that was orange.
They have the most orange sounding names ever. Cale Yarborough.
Yeah, he was from Louisiana. He got hit. Apparently, legend has it. I don't know if any of this is true, but he's been hit by lightning twice, and he used to wrestle alligators. Like he would jump off a boat and just grab them and start beating the hell out of them.
I feel like if he's from Louisiana, the NASCAR racing is like the most, bland thing of his life.
Yeah,
right?
Exactly.
Like this is totally believable.
And it's not Louisiana. It's not Louisiana. I pronounce it wrong. It's Louisiana.
Thank you for that. So while you're still thinking about your current favorite sponsor car driver combo, tell me, is there anything that just represents America more than a weekend like at a track?
No. I've been to MLB games. I've been to football.
I've thought about that one.
I've been to football. Yeah, I don't have to think about that one.
Yeah.
I've been to football, everything.
True, you have been to everything.
I have been to just about every major sporting event, hockey games, all that stuff. And there is no better display of America than there is a NASCAR race. Like at Talladega, they have, the huge flyover at the end of the great national anthem. They have a tractor for like an 18-wheeler coming about 120 miles an hour down the track with a giant American flag off the back of it where the trailer hitches, where he would actually pull the trailer. Paratroopers coming in, dragging American flags, and it is unbelievable. They used to do a great one at Lowe's, too, at Lowe's Motor Speedway in Charlotte. I mean, they would actually put on a mock military exercise where they're blowing shit up in the infield and tearing stuff up, and they have soldiers rappelling down from helicopters like they're doing an attack. There is no greater display of America than a NASCAR race. Hands down. There's no challengers. Nobody comes even close.
Which car of Cale Yarborough did you like? Because it looks like he has a bunch.
Yeah, he has a bunch. Hardee's 28. And there's one more. Yeah. That one, and I have a few. There's Davey Allison's 28 when he raced for Davey Allison was killed in a helicopter crash at Talladega. His car, I love that. I like simplicity. And then probably, I guess, I'm looking right now. My favorite's probably Dale Earnhardt, if I go back to it. Just the simple black, the silver on the flashing on the bottom of the car, and
sharp.
Yeah.
Very sharp. Wow. Cale Yarborough has a really sweet looking one that kind of looks like the old Buccaneers uniform. It's like mustard yellow or like, kind of like creamsicle and white, and Holly Farms. That was the sponsor.
Oh, there's some great cars out there. There are some awesome
Dude,
awesome.
he was Busch Beer.
Yeah, he was Busch, and he's the one that in the 1979 Daytona 500 he was leading. Him and Donnie Allison were going. It was the first nationally televised NASCAR race, and there was a snowstorm in the Northeast. So everybody, that's when he only had 3 channels in 1979.
Oh yeah.
So everybody was watching the race. Everybody was stuck inside, and they go banging down the backstretch. They wreck each other, and then they pull off the track. They start yelling at each other, and then Donnie Allison's brother Bobby pulls up, and him and Cale Yarborough get into a fist fight that gets caught on camera at the end of the race. So launched NASCAR into the forefront.
Yeah, that is what I do like about NASCAR is there is a little WWF like sprinkled in. Like after races, like guys will just get out of their car, walk all the way over to the other guy's like camp, and just get right in his face and be like, "You motherfucker," and throw Pepsi in his face.
Yeah. No, it's great, and they need to make sure they continue that. NASCAR needs to, and they have.
Right.
They did back a few years ago. They said just boys have at it, to a certain extent. They don't want to. I don't like when they tear the cars up. When they go after their cars and everything. Get out of the car and fight them like a man. If you're not going to fight them like a man, then walk back to your trailer with your tail between your legs.
I think you can segue into your movie, but I think we need to do this like at least on a quarterly basis, Bob, because there is so much meat on this bone. That if you'll come back, I think we could keep doing this as a recurring segment.
Certainly, absolutely, yeah.
That's what she said. Well, segue or no segue, we also have Bob for a couple more minutes here, and since he is not only a NASCAR NASA genius, he's a history buff. I mean, you've seen him on the podcast. He comes on, we do History Hour. And now, Bob, you're